Hey, everybody, welcome to the Jim Masters Show. It is good to have you with us. This is our entertainment lifestyle talk show series that we started many moons ago, and it's amazing. Some 440 plus episodes we have done of this incredible series with all of you watching, all of you being interactive. And we thank you so very much. If this is your first time, welcome to JMS, the Jim Masters Show. This is an entertainment lifestyle talk show series that sort of harkens back a little bit to the old school variety talk shows you may remember, with the legendary hosts like Dick Cavett and Johnny Carson and Dick Clark and Merv Griffin and Mike Douglas. I mean, those traditional legendary hosts. So we take some of that conversational, warm, freestyle atmosphere and blend it with a modern vibe and a modern twist of today. Our audience, called the Lovities, they're always commenting during the show, and we love that. This is a very interactive broadcast between myself, your host, Jim Masters, dubbed by our audience as Mr. Lovity, because last year, and I say this in the beginning of each show for the new folks that are watching, because we're always getting new folks discovering, and that word discover and discovery is very important to today's episode. I'll tell you in a second. But a lot of people are discovering this show, even though we've done 440 plus episodes. And counting. By the time you're watching this, we may have done 500 or more. What happened is I said the show has a lot of light, love, and levity. And when I said light, love, and levity, the audience loved that. But then I said levity accidentally. And when I said levity, the viewers just said, that's fantastic. I love that word, levity. And especially during everything, everybody's been going through the last year or so, we certainly need more levity, right? And when I said the word levity, the audience jumped on it. The audience automatically said, all right, that's it. We are your levity squad. We are your levities. You're Mr. Levity. And we're going to call this, where you do the show from, Levity Hall. I'll take it. I think that's amazing. We do the show here in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut tri-state area here in the United States, along the southern New England coast between New York and Boston. And we've just had a blast with guests coming in from literally all walks of life and levels of success and fields of endeavor, from Broadway, Hollywood, television, film, sports, comedy, inspiration, culinary arts, television, music, and so much more. And it's so wonderful when we have an opportunity to interact with our guests, but also interact with you, because sometimes we do surprise pop-up shows too, where I just pop up and we have host and lovely viewer interaction and great commentary. We talk about life. We talk about all kinds of cool things that are happening. So it's an entertainment lifestyle talk show series, again, patterned after the old school talk shows, but again, with that modern twist and modern vibe. We welcome everybody that's watching right now from literally all around the world, United States, Canada, Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia. It's extraordinary where we see the viewers coming from. And you guys are so interactive too. And I think that's truly amazing. We do this on the YouTube channel. That's where we house the Jim Masters Show live series. So while you're there on our YouTube channel, we would absolutely love it if you haven't yet. You subscribe to the channel. Reason why, of course, it allows us to continue to deliver all this great content to you just about 7 days a week, but also it allows us to connect with you even more. And if you click that notification bell that you see there, it's a little bell icon. Make sure you click that, because that way there you'll be notified when we have fresh new episodes, which generally is every day, and our surprise pop-up shows and on-location episodes as well, and so much more. So subscribe to the YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV. Click the notification bell. We thank you, thank you, thank you. And while you're there, leave a comment under this episode, on this video, so that way we know you're really enjoying it. And that also helps us as well. YouTube loves that. We love that. And click the like button. That is really important too. If you're really enjoying this episode or any of the many episodes that we are delivering to you, make sure you click that as well on our YouTube channel. And again, thanks for joining us. Always a beautiful, beautiful opportunity to engage and connect with you here on the show. If this is your first time, welcome. If you've been here all the time, thank you so very, very much. Got a very special guest who's coming to us from a beautiful place. It's a really a national treasure. It's called Discovery Park of America. And we're going to talk about it in just a second. Our very special guest is not only the president and CEO of Discovery Park of America, he's also author of this really cool book, The Accidental Fame and Lack of Fortune of West Tennessee's, yes, David Crockett. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. First, we have this really cool video we want to show you. If you're not familiar with Discovery Park of America, it's based in Tennessee. People literally come to visit from all around the world. This place is really extraordinary. It's good for, children, of course, but really anybody of any age will fall in love with this wonderful place. And we have a wonderful video here that we want to show you, giving you a little idea of what the park offers, what it's all about. And then we'll have Scott join us in just a second to talk more about the park and about this really incredible book he authored that he's very excited about, and so are we. So let's take you now to Tennessee, to Union City, and discover Discovery Park of America.
The Webster Dictionary defines inspiration as the power of moving the intellect and emotions. Since opening its doors in 2013, millions of children and adults have experienced that power firsthand and have benefited from the vision of Robert Kirkland and the community of Union City, Tennessee.
It's a story you're not going to hear over and over and over. It's probably the most unique story of our community, in that somebody not only chose to live here, but they chose to invest and give back.
All of us here at Discovery Park like to keep in mind how we started and the original vision for our museum and heritage park. Everything we do, we try to make sure that we're focused on important things like education and innovation and inspiring children and adults to see beyond.
Discovery Park of America is almost as hard to describe as it is to believe. With exhibits and interactive hands-on experiences focused on science, technology, history, art, and more, you literally never know what is right around the next corner. And many times, it's something you've never seen before.
For our students, some of them, it's their first time being on an escalator, being on an elevator. But then the real part is when they come and see these activities, these hands-on artifacts from different areas.
It's very educational for them, and it's a fun education. They don't really know that they're learning whenever they're involved in it, so we just love that this is something that we can share with them.
And also, we want to support this, just because there's not just fun times here, just come to play and throw them into a little play area. They learn here. We all learn here.
We've been given a powerful gift by Robert and Jenny Kirkland. And thanks to our volunteers, our sponsors, and our generous donors, we plan to make certain we take stewardship of that gift seriously so that Discovery Park will be here for the communities we serve for decades to come.
As we look into the future, we're excited about the lives that will be changed, the many new careers begun, and the new and different paths that will be taken because of visiting Discovery Park of America and being inspired to see beyond.
That is a beautiful video. That is absolutely fantastic. And here is our special guest, the president and CEO of Discovery Park of America in Union City, Tennessee, Scott Williams. Scott, welcome to our show. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. I love talking about Discovery Park. So thanks for having me.
As I mentioned, discover and discovery, important words on today's show as people discover this show and they discover the park. Tell us about the inspiration and vision for the park. It's really an extraordinary place, isn't it?
Sure, yeah, and it's also it's a fascinating story. Robert Kirkland grew up here in Union City. His parents had a little five and dime store, and he was forced to work there. He didn't really love the working directly on the floor, but what he discovered through working there that he loved doing was traveling around the world and purchasing things, um, and then figuring out how to manufacture those wholesale and sell them retail. He just loved discovering new things. And it really, that opportunity changed his life as he and his wife became more and more successful. They opened a store called Kirkland's, which is a lot like a Pier 1,
Mhm.
depending on what part of the country you live in. And it just became a huge success. And he continued to become more and more successful. And then he and his wife really looked for ways to give back to the community. So they funded pre-K for underprivileged kids. They sent students to Europe because they felt like, that was the really great way to open your eyes to things that you might not experience. And so we're up in the northwest corner of Tennessee. We're very close to Kentucky, Arkansas, and Missouri. And we're in an area where there are some areas around us that are distressed counties where there are people that might not get the opportunity to go um, to other countries, to go to museums, even to experience the world. And so Robert and Jenny Kirkland really wanted to figure out what can we do to provide for people in this region an experience that will inspire them to see beyond where they are in life. And it's whether you're children or adults or anything. And so one of my favorite parts of the story is Robert Kirkland put an ad in the paper and said, if you're interested in joining me in creating a center for inspiration, meet me at the library on this date at this time. And people came, 250 people came, and they broke up into the committees, and he wanted real people to say, what do you think would make a center for inspiration? And these people took their challenge seriously, and they put together committees, and he then took all of that to experts in the museum business. He thought his budget was $30 million, and by the time he was done, he had spent over $100 million to create this 100,000 square foot museum sitting on a 50-acre heritage park.
That is absolutely incredible. What a beautiful story, too, and the passion and the vision. And like you say, it's an impressive state of the art 100,000 plus square foot museum that's sitting on this beautifully landscaped heritage park in Union City, Tennessee. Tell us about some of the amazing programs, the exhibits, the hands-on activities that happen. This is a very interactive park, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's both a blessing, but sometimes a curse to try to figure out exactly what do we need to do, because when you work in the museum business and you oftentimes have to check boxes on what kind of a museum you are. There's art, there's science, there's earth, there's history, and we're honestly all of that and then some. We are every area that you can think of. I try to explain us or describe us as a curio cabinet. Back in the 17 1800s, wealthy people would travel around the world and bring things back to their curio cabinet, which was a
Mhm.
room. And so whether they collected art or sculptures or all different aspects of science or rocks, fossils, they would put all that in their curio cabinet. That's a lot what we're like. You never know what is right around the next corner. You'll go from a transportation gallery with over 50 vintage automobiles right around the corner to a military gallery where we have a lot of things on display there relating to all the past wars, to the Titan missile. You will then exit, and right there you have a picture of the Titan missile. You push the button, and while it doesn't take off, it vibrates the ground, and it's one of the favorite things a lot of young people love to do is come out and push the button to make the Titan missile
Yeah.
seem as though it's going to take off.
That transportation area, that display is incredible too, huh?
Yeah, there's a I've often said that if I was going to be on one of the committees, the transportation committee that Robert Kirkland put together would be the one I would want to be on, because those people got to travel all over the country and bid in at auctions
Mhm.
on all of these cars that ended up being in our collection.
Wow, that's truly amazing. Really, really is. Here's another great shot we have too. The dinosaurs, huh?
Yeah, that's a photograph in the upper right hand corner there. You see the giant manslide. When you enter Discovery Park, you enter from the second floor, and that giant manslide is the first thing you see. You enter into his back, and you slide all the way down his torso, down his leg to the next floor. And so both children and adults are welcome to try that. But I can tell you that a 200-pound man goes down that leg about 400 miles an hour.
Wow. 400 miles an hour.
Yeah, I landed about 30 feet in front of his foot.
Oh. So you're referring to yourself with that. That's cool.
Yeah, but I did it at like 4 o'clock in the morning, so nobody would see
So
me.
nobody would say. And tell us what we see here, Scott. This is
Yeah,
the actual.
the actual museum is called Discovery Center, and that's what's sitting. That's what you were seeing pictures of the inside. Obviously, it is a very dramatic looking piece of architecture,
Yeah.
unlike anything else you would see anywhere around here. I actually had lunch with the architect not too long ago, and I said, everyone asks me, what is that? Is it
Yeah.
waves? Is it a dinosaur?
Yeah.
And he said Robert Kirkland wanted it to be whatever anybody wanted it to be. So
Mm,
it's completely up to your imagination, so people can discover for themselves how they interpret the architecture.
absolutely. Here's a beautiful shot here too.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
50 acres. What you're seeing there in the middle to the right are cabins that were actually taken from all over this region and put back together again here at Discovery Park. And so you can explore both the inside. They've been decorated. There's a statue of David Crockett there in between, because he was a settler in this area who helped settle. And so just all kinds of things like that. You could literally spend days here exploring and never get bored.
Mm, I tell you, and I'm sure people do, and they come back again and again and again too, because each time, you miss something the first time and you come back. There's another great shot looking down at the play area.
Yeah, and
It's really nice. It's all
there's a lot.
natural too, right? It's all natural.
Yeah, there's a lot to do in this area that has to do with nature. We're very close to a lake that's called Realfoot Lake. It was actually partially formed during a series of earthquakes that took place
Mm,
along the New Madrid fault line in the early 1800s. And so it actually opened the ground up, and the Mississippi River flowed backwards into it and filled it up. And so boats and steamboats and flatboats report of all of a sudden headed down the Mississippi River and suddenly going the other direction because of the earthquake and the movement of the waters. And so it's become a huge place for bird watching. We have a lot of eagles that nest around the area. We're in what's called the Mississippi flyover, so we have a lot of waterfowl that stay here 2 or 3 times during the season. So it's really a place that's popular for duck hunters and bird watchers and people who like
mhm,
to hike and things like that. So it's really a beautiful area.
mm. Astronaut exhibit as well, huh?
Yeah, yeah, we have a lot of temporary exhibits that come through here. Think about it. Some of these young people may have never thought about becoming an astronaut, but because they come here and experience this, we're definitely changing lives.
Mm, that is
One of my
incredible.
favorite things to do when we have a busy day with a lot of students is to stand up close to the escalators. We're the only escalator in the region. And so I get to watch kids who are seeing an escalator for the very first time, and their minds are blown. And so if you're blowing kids' minds with an escalator, just imagine what they're experiencing when they get to run around here and see all this.
I can vouch for the excitement of an escalator because when we were shopping as kids or when our parents were shopping at Sears or J.C. Penney, uh, to try to get us off the escalator so we can go home as opposed to going up and then running around the other side and going down and then running around the other side and going up the escalator. The excitement as a kid at Sears of the escalator was a big deal. So the fact that you have something like an exhibit like that there at Discovery Park, I can see how kids love it because they used to have to drag us off. We're going home. We're going home. Let's go. We're starting the car. You don't want to stay here, in the store by yourself, do you? Come on. Let's go. Come off that escalator.
Well, and because of that, we actually have our escalators and our elevators in glass so that you can actually see how they work and how they function.
That's
And hopefully
cool.
we're inspiring young people to remember that when they're deciding what areas they're fascinated by.
That is really, really cool. You mentioned the changing exhibits too. How far in advance do you know when you're going to have different exhibits, and what are you looking for when there are new, incredible exhibits to include in the mix there at the park?
Sure. We typically like to have decisions like that made 3 years in advance. And so we'll have a schedule that we'll stick to. We try to find exhibits, both temporary and new permanent exhibits, that we think will speak to or tell a story that needs to be told
Yeah.
to either to the folks in this area or from the folks in this area. So a good example is recently we felt like there was a lack of the agriculture story told here. We're in a big agriculture region, and Discovery Park is in the middle of a cornfield, or what used to be a cornfield. And so, what better place to tell the story of innovation in agriculture? So, we did a bunch of focus groups with farmers and ag workers, and we even had a focus group with kids where we said, describe a farmer. And every one of them, what do you think was the one word? If you ask a group of kids to describe a farmer, you have any idea what the number one word was?
Hmm. To describe a farm?
A farmer.
A farmer.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I'll tell you, the number one word was overalls. That's
Yeah.
what all kids knew was overalls.
The overalls. Yeah.
And so even more frightening was we said, "Would you want to be a farmer?" 100% of the kids said no. And so we're living in a world now where by 2050, we've got to greatly increase the food, fuel, and fiber that is created. And so if our best and brightest students are laughing at the thought of going into agriculture, then we're in our children and grandchildren are going to be in trouble. So we put
Yeah.
this exhibit together that tells the story of innovation in agriculture and how the STEM subjects are interwoven into those careers. And so we wanted kids who came through, we wanted them to see themselves as potentially being someone who could work in agriculture. So we traveled all around ag shows and took more than 250 pictures of agriculture workers, and those are throughout the exhibit. So as kids are walking through, they might see themselves, as someone, they're men and women and young and old and black and Hispanic and white, and it's everybody. And
It's
so
America. Yeah.
it's really great for them to get to see that and imagine themselves when they're deciding what fields to go into. Maybe they'll select agriculture.
We always used to love as kids going to the 4-H fairs and all these different festivals and fairs where you get a chance to actually, participate and sample all the great foods and all the great things that come from the farms and the fields. And there's a lot of children too who are in the urban areas and the inner cities who I know think that they don't have any understanding of where milk comes from or cheese, or that there actually is an initial source. It isn't just the cardboard carton that it comes in. So that can be very enlightening too, to discover all of that, right?
Yeah, a lot of people have never actually seen cotton growing in a field. A lot of adults have never seen cotton grow. So we have we have a little patch of cotton, soybeans, corn. We have a vineyard here. We have a lot of pollinator gardens so that we can teach about the benefits of pollinators. So it's fun for me to look out there and see a lot of adults and children walking through the different fields and touching the cotton and see the parents explaining to the kids what that is. So, yeah, it's a very interactive. In fact, Robert Kirkland didn't really like the word museum because for
Right.
him that conjured up a negative image. So he wanted to make sure that we never kept people from touching things. So
Right.
throughout the property, you'll see signs that say, please walk on our grass.
The opposite of what you'll see, maybe even your own neighbors might have signs, "Keep off the grass."
That's
Here you
right.
get to go and you get to run around and have some fun on the grass. What's the feedback that you guys get? I'm sure you get all kinds of notes and posts and letters from people saying that was really a beautiful experience, not only for the kids that come through, but for the parents being, maybe getting in touch with their childhood again, or just feeling free and appreciating, America, appreciating the contributions, appreciating life. I'm sure it's really a beautiful thing, some of the feedback that you get, huh?
Oh, that's probably one of the most rewarding things about what I get to do. Um, you know, the only complaint that we get, and we get this complaint a lot, is I had no idea. If I had known, I would have planned 2 more days to
Yeah.
do. It really is when you come around that corner. If you've never been here before, and I get to do it every single day,
Yeah.
it still blows my mind every time I see it. It's a huge building, and it's glistening white, and so it really is stark contrast against the blue sky and the agriculture that you see surrounding it. So it's just the very beginning of the experience is mind blowing, and then. Of course, we have two huge lakes with a meandering stream that connects them with bridges, and it's highly landscaped. We have Japanese gardens, European gardens, American gardens. We have vegetable gardens that are heritage gardens. So everywhere around you, it almost looks like Eden. It's just landscaping. There are ducks and geese and all different types of birds around. So, people are just every once in a while, the ticket counter will call me down because somebody has said, look, I got to find out what is the story of this place? How did this come to be? And so they'll call me down and I'll tell people the story and they just are flabbergasted. There is, I've been in the museum business for a long time and there is nothing else like this anywhere else in the world.
It really sounds like that, Scott. And I know just hearing your passion and your enthusiasm for it, sometimes you probably even feel like a little kid there too, don't you? Just
Oh,
because of the
not just
energy.
sometimes,
Yeah, all the time.
all the time. I have to pinch myself sometimes. This is too good to be true.
Yeah. I say that oftentimes we are merely just big kids in adult clothing.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, that goes double for me.
Here's a cool sort of map of some of the park itself. Are there plans for additional expansion too, or is the park? Sometimes when facilities are built, they're like, "Gee, we want more space, so we can expand this, and we're going to put in this, and we're going to build that." Is there any of that thought to expand it even further than it is, or do you like it the size it is, and it's self-contained, and it's delivering everything it needs to deliver?
Well, I think as far as right now, um, we have more property than we need. There's not been a
Yeah,
single person who's ever said, "Oh, I wish there was more to do."
right.
We have a lot, but what's interesting is right behind us, as you see, there's a 13-story tower there that you can ride an elevator up into. And if you were to be able to do that today, you would see right behind us. You can see just a little bit of it over the top of the cabins, or what appears to be a huge gravel
Mm.
runway. But that's actually a section of I-69, and I-69 runs from Canada all the way down to Mexico. And so this is the connector part that hasn't been completed. And so they've been working on
Ah.
it for about 6 years,
Mhm.
and they just now started paving about 2 weeks ago. So by the end of this summer, that entire section will be paved and will be ready to open.
Wow. So
That'll bring
that's
a lot
terrific.
more people down towards us, and we've
Yeah.
got an exit ramp on each side of us.
Now, like we said, there's all kinds of different exhibits and celebrations and things that happen throughout the year. Um, we're doing this now, so somebody might watch this a year from now. But just to give people a sense and a good idea of some of the types of exhibits that happen, there is one, a big, big celebration honoring David Crockett as well, right? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so David Crockett was from this area. He moved here in 1822 when literally there was nobody else hardly living here. It was a section of the country that had been Native American hunting grounds. And so the Native Americans who lived in other areas would use this whole area to hunt. And obviously, Americans were hungry for land and they were eager to push the Native Americans off so they could take over. And David Crockett was one of the very early settlers who came here. His father in law had been given land for his service in the Revolutionary War. And so David Crockett took advantage of that and headed this away. And really was a passionate settler. He ended up, even though he could barely read and write, he ended up being a congressman. So he went to Washington representing the people of this area, and he really was somebody who stood up for the common man. He wasn't going to do what he was told to do by his party. He was a somebody who did what he thought was right, regardless of what the political party, had decided as a group they were going to pursue. And so he was a fly in the ointment, so to speak, and was an enemy of Andrew Jackson. But in spite of the threats to his own career, he continued to champion laws that would help regular folks up here in Northwest Tennessee and in all of West Tennessee, which included Memphis and Jackson, Tennessee, some of the cities in the western part of the state. So he was obviously a character that worked on his own brand, worked on his
Yeah.
own image, probably to his detriment. He eventually lost and went to the Alamo where he was killed. But then after that, sort of the myth of David Crockett began to grow. Some of the seeds that he himself had planted just took off, and he became a mythical figure.
Yes.
In the 1950s, Walt Disney and his writers seized upon that mythical figure and created this explosion that really cemented this image of Davy Crockett, King of the Wild
Davy.
Frontier, for all of eternity. And so here in Union City at Discovery Park, it's his 235th birthday. So we're going to celebrate. We like to celebrate the real David Crockett, the actual man who lived here and walked these same areas and these same woods and hunted around Realfoot Lake. And so we're going to have a big celebration for Davy Crockett's birthday. And we do a lot of things like that. We really know that our mission is to make people stop and think. And so sometimes that's hard with all the distractions that we all have with with our phones in front of our face and the TV and as media has fragmented, there's all these different things we got to keep up with. We've got to record all these shows or TiVo them or Netflix them, however you do it. And so it's really hard sometimes for us to shake people loose of that and help them to stop and think. And so this is just one of the many ways we do that.
That's fantastic. And folks, again, if they want to learn more about some of the events and some of the cool things that are happening at the park, there is the website to go to. It's a great website. It's beautifully done, and it gives you all the information you need. In addition to this appreciation for David Crockett as far as being celebrated at the park itself, you yourself have taken on this wonderful mission of really celebrating him as well. And you've penned this book. Tell us about this and what was the inspiration and what was it about David Crockett that really spoke to you, Scott?
Sure. So, when I first arrived here, I moved back here. I'm originally from West Tennessee. I grew up in Memphis. And so I was living and working in Washington, D.C., and moved back here about 3 years ago. And one of the first things I saw, of course, was the statue of David Crockett that we have here at Discovery Park. We have an exhibit here about David Crockett and his congressional career. And then we have some other David Crockett things spread throughout the park. And so I was just curious. So I started looking for what I could find to read. And what I became fixated, I guess you could almost call, I became passionate and fascinated about the fame aspects of this Tennessee frontiersman who was uneducated. How in the world, what was the path that ended up in him being one of the most famous people during his time, and certainly someone that has had his fame has had longevity that really no one else had. And so it was really a interesting for me to dive in. My background was working. I had worked for 12 years for Elvis Presley Enterprises, so I was had a proximity to famous people and how you promote and advertise and market a famous person. And then I moved up to Washington D.C., where I worked for the museum, which was a museum of the First Amendment, with a lot of emphasis on freedom of the press and communications and news. And so I guess all of those interests just sort of boiled together to make me fascinated by how this uneducated, unable, barely able to read, barely able to write, how did he learn? How did he figure out how to master what was a developing um, fame machine early on, before there was, any real mass communication. So there's what's fascinating is this character that he created kind of gobbled up the real person. And so the real person, has in many ways by most people been forgotten. And those who do know who Davy Crockett is think of a Davy Crockett um, that is not real. So,
Yeah.
so to me, that was what was interesting. And when you look at today's fame, you look at people today who are able to, become famous for being famous, who
Yeah.
capitalize on the media that we're using today and the shift in how people consume media. And so he did the same thing back in his day. So I was just fascinated in diving into that and exploring it while simultaneously looking at how um, entertainment was growing, entertainment was developing.
Right.
American writers and actors and singers and entertainers, in the early 1800s, there was no American history of entertainment. So they were creating it. And I found it fascinating that they knew they were doing that. They specifically said to each other, "Hey, we are creating American entertainment. We're not copying what they do in Europe, what they do in the UK. We're creating American entertainment." So that I loved.
Mm. He actually is, and it says it on the cover of the book, and congratulations on the book as well, Scott. America's first celebrity.
And of course, people could argue with me on who really was America's first celebrity, but I would welcome the argument anytime. So they could just call me. But I have a lot of reasons why I felt like you really could pinpoint him as he wasn't, even though he was a representative for these people. He wasn't really a politician in the true sense of the word. He was also not really. Somebody who was a talented writer or a singer, or he truly was somebody who in a lot of ways became famous for being famous. He uh because one other thing to throw out there that was fascinating is I was writing this and researching it during the time when we as a nation were, I guess we still are, but when we were, we had a lot of people who were politically at odds with each other. And so we had a lot of people who were, looking at a particular leader who was running for president and didn't like him. And we had a lot of divisiveness. And it was the same way in when Crockett, was here. Um, Andrew Jackson, was a Tennessean, and he was running for president. He became president. And David Crockett did not do what Andrew Jackson told him to, even though they were in the same party. So it was
Mhm.
interesting to see how that divisiveness led to the Whigs, which were the opposing party, sort of embracing David Crockett and saying, this guy might could actually become president. And so
Mm.
they started helping him with his speeches. They sort of started helping him with his brand image. But I think he was even more outrageous than they could handle. So I think they had bit off a little more than they could chew as well. So this is a guy who just lived large and eventually loved the applause, as a lot of
Yeah.
people who are famous will tell you. They like the fame and the adoration and the love they get from people. And, he just really embraced that and was, I think, one of the first people to do so in America.
Now, somebody may say, does the world need another biography of the king of the wild frontier? Tell us about that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there are literally hundreds of books written about David Crockett. Davy Crockett is what these would call it. So there's hundreds of books about Davy Crockett that go into great detail. Now there are three or four books that are sort of the definitive topic. People who've really dove in and really did a lot of research on his life and career, and then a lot of other people have copied those. And so I didn't really feel like I didn't do he was born here and then he did this and then he died. Mine is really more of a deep dive into different aspects of his career that by the time you finish reading it, you will both understand a little bit more about who he was and what inspired him. What was he trying to accomplish, and then also even mostly that, and then a little tiny bit of what happened next. How did, after he died, my book for the most part ends when he crosses the Mississippi River headed to the Alamo, because my book is about David Crockett and his relationship to this region of the country. And so, but in the epilogue, I do talk a little bit about how he died, or how we think he died. Like a lot of celebrities, his death was controversial, and there's a lot of people used it for their own benefit one way or the other, so we don't know exactly what happened. And again, like Elvis Presley, there were Crockett sightings for decades after his death, to the point where his son even had the U.S. government investigate one. There was a David Crockett that everybody was certain was the David Crockett that was working in a mine in Mexico. So there were all these reports similar to an Elvis Presley. But anyway, so my book is mostly about that, which is a little different. Also, I felt like I was writing through the funnel of having been around Elvis and Elvis Presley fans and some of his bandmates, and witnessing fame, and then witnessing politics up in Washington, working on the inside like that. So my book has a slightly different slant. So hopefully it enhances what's out there, what the other really talented authors have done.
That's amazing. What was the writing process like, doing all this research and digging deep as you had to compile everything and do an accurate depiction of David Crockett?
Sure. For me, researching a book, first of all, I'm a huge reader. I love to read and always have. And so, but for me, and this is my third book, writing these books is a lot like reading from the inside out. It's like a deeper part of reading. I mean, I really get into a zone. My wife has made me promise I will not start another book anytime soon, because it really is all encompassing. I mean, I
And
become obsessed. It's almost like I
yeah,
can't stop.
yeah.
I can't not continue. So,
And the lawn
um,
still has to be mowed too, right?
right. Well, that's what my wife does. No, I'm just kidding. I take care of that. But but no, it's so much fun. To me, each part of doing a book like this is so rewarding. Each aspect of it is rewarding in a completely different way. I love to like opportunities like this to share with you and your viewers these stories about Davy Crockett that maybe they didn't know about. And so I'm a talker, as you might have been able to notice. And so I love to talk about, these stories. And that's a fun part of it. But I also love just spending time in a library, where they're getting ready to close and I'm still pulling out
Yeah,
stuff and researching and just completely focused and obsessed, with trying to get to the bottom. I would find it for this particular book, I would find facts that were different. in
Right.
very different books. And so, I would really spend time trying to get to the bottom of what is the truth. Now, in this case, it's been a long time since David Crockett was around. So, a lot of times I had to dig, and I just had to say in the book, some people say this, other people say that. We'll never
Right.
know exactly what the truth is. You'll just have to figure out what you think the truth is based on everything else. So it's a blast. Now, it's also I also have a museum to run and a family to raise. So you have to spend time doing other things as well. As you're a hugely busy guy, so you know what it's
It's a
like.
balancing act. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to say, okay, you know what, I got to get my priorities in order and
It's
slow my roll.
That's so true. As life gets busier and busier and busier, and we have to be so plugged in with everything 24/7 now. It's like we're on call doctors. It's really amazing. What are a few things, maybe some misconceptions, some myths? We don't want to give everything away because we would love people to get the book, but maybe a couple of things that people think because of the dramatic presentation of Davy Crockett. That are myths, misconceptions that you discovered along the way that maybe don't line up with the way we always think about Davy Crockett.
Sure. One is the word, the name Davy. Um, Davy is not really what he called himself. Davy was sort of negative. Back then, unlike today, the politicians were quite harsh to each other and called each other names. And um, so Davy was sort of a negative. So he really went by David. He didn't wear a coonskin cap any more than anyone else who was a frontier wore a coonskin cap. You had a picture of him a little earlier on the screen. That was David Crockett. Yeah, this is what David Crockett actually looked like. There was a time when and this is an example of what we cover in the book. There was a time when he was getting a portrait done. He died just about, if he had lived about 5 more years, we would have a photograph of him. But he died before there was an opportunity to get a photograph of him. So we have to rely on paintings. Well, he had a painter painting his picture, and he wanted every aspect to be organized. He picked out the clothes that he wore in the painting, and even the hunting dogs that are seen in the painting. He did not like the fancy rich people hunting dogs that the painter had acquired. And so he and the painter went out on the streets of Washington, D.C., looking for mongrels that he thought looked like the kind of dogs he would use in Tennessee on a bear hunt. And so he actually managed every single detail of things like that so that um, people would understand who he wanted them to think he was. And so he, even to the point of the painter wrote, many years later, that they just couldn't figure out something about it wasn't right. And so David Crockett came in one morning. He was so excited. He said, I figured it out. And so he wanted to take his hat in the painting and act like he was waving at his neighbors to make them
Ah,
friendly. And so the painter said, "Okay, let's do it." And so painted him like that, and that's probably one of the more famous photographs
yeah.
or
Chester Harding,
paintings.
1834, that goes back to. Yeah.
Yes.
A beautiful, beautiful shot, too. And it's really amazing. I tell you, when you discover these kinds of things about American history and about how stories are sort of twisted and morphed, the more they're told and told, and they're separated from actual events sometimes, how they grow to great grandeur or they fizzle out based on the interpretations and who's telling the story and where they come from. And I'm sure you probably discovered a lot of that along the way doing the research, right?
Well, and I couldn't help while I was doing that, to your point, I couldn't help while I was doing it of thinking, what are people going to be thinking about what we're going through 200 years from now. So, in a lot of ways, because I was so deep into this, as I was watching the news and as I was reading online, what everything going on, I was thinking, how will this be analyzed and interpreted? Because when you throw in a pandemic, obviously, this era that you and I and your viewers are getting to live through together, um, this is going to be something that will be studied and analyzed. And what we're going through now will impact society in dramatic ways that we can't even begin to understand at this point.
They'll be reading about this in the history books and perpetuity for sure, Scott. I say the only people that could have scripted what we're going through probably would have been Rod Serling from the Twilight Zone, Steven Spielberg, or Stephen King.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as somebody who is fascinated by both entertainment and politics, this whole little era that we're going through, and also, of course, tour and travel and museums, all those things are fascinating to me. And we're going through an era when all those things are rapidly changing and evolving quicker than any of us could possibly keep up with.
That is so very, very true. Um, a little bit more about the fame. What else did you discover about David Crockett's fame that fascinated you?
Sure. So to me, one of the most interesting parts of his fame, and the reason why I think the thing that really fueled a lot of his fame was the fact that Americans, they were living on the east part of the country, and they had their eyes on expansion, and they
Right.
knew, that the folks who were running the plantations knew that they were out of land. They had already left their children, they divided it up, and now those children had half or a fourth or a quarter, and now they wanted more. And so they wanted to expand. Tennessee, where I live, was an incredibly fertile area. And so it was right there on the edge of that expansion. And so, in a lot of ways, Davy Crockett represented for those people this new kind of American. He was, outrageous, funny, had a great charisma and sense of humor, and had a gun. Was even though it wasn't true, uh, they branded him as someone who, was an Indian killer, and so that fueled that hunger and thirst for land fueled a lot of the press coverage he got. There were plays written about him. There were that he actually, interestingly, got to go to, so he got to go and see a play about him. He was inserted into the folk music of the day, so writers were putting him or characters that were clearly based on the persona that he invented. They put him in those stories, and so he just really um, just permeated every single tool that was available to artists of the day, um, creative people of the day. And so, in many ways, he was a muse. And once they got a taste of how successful, people bought the books he was in, people read the newspaper articles and wanted more. That just fueled more and more and more. And so, back then it was a frequent practice. If you're running one newspaper, you see something in another newspaper, you just pick it up and run it in yours. And so there's a lot of that just went on and on and on. And so, I think that really did fuel. Now, of course, you think about this hugely famous guy. He loses his election, and he tells everybody else, okay, fine, you don't want me, you can go to hell, I'm going to Texas.
Mm.
And so he took off for Texas, because in his letters, what he's saying to everybody, what he's saying to his family is, look, and this is another thing we didn't mention, and it's in the title of the book, so I should mention the lack of fortune. Crockett, like many celebrities of the day spend more than they make, and it costs a lot to be a celebrity, it costs a lot to go to Washington. So he basically spent more than he made, borrowed to pay off his debt, and then had to pay off that debt. He never really made a financial success, even though he really wanted to be successful. In his mind, what he thought was, I'm going to go to Texas, I'm going to get some land, I'm going to sign up for the military there, and they're going to give me land as a result of that. And then I'm going to go to Washington, and I'm going to represent what's surely going to become a state. And so he had a long-term plan in place. Unfortunately, he got caught up in the Alamo. He was only in Texas for months, mere months, not any longer than that. And he was killed, and so it was a huge story. It became it took what would already have been a big story, but it just magnified it when you have a celebrity who has had this tragic death. Of course, newspapers wrote about it, songs were written about it. It helped fuel the Texas Revolution. um, it just was an aspect of this that I think has become such a part of the story of the Alamo that people don't realize how bizarre it is that this happened. So one writer talked about, it would be as though, and I can't remember the exact name, but they said as though someone like Frank Sinatra stepped on the Titanic,
Right.
right before it went down. So
Mm.
it was really, it was really a fascinating part of the story. And I think that too fueled his fame and made him become even more famous after he was dead.
Mm. Which sometimes happens.
Often, yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing too when you're going through quotes and you're going through photos to use and to narrow that down so it really uh, matches what the story is you're trying to tell. What inspired you, Scott, to select the photos that you selected and the quotes you included in the book?
Sure. So, you know, a lot of books you read about historical figures will have a picture of the cabin they lived in, or have a picture of, a painting of them. What I really wanted to do was show the pop culture aspects of David Crockett. So, I looked for from the very beginning, from the earliest novels in the 1800s, the little magazines that included him, and all the way through the decades. And I didn't put them in any order. Every chapter starts with a completely irrelevant pop of David Crockett in pop culture. I got some more contemporary folks, like Bart Chateau, who's working on a Davy Crockett Broadway or a play in New York, that maybe someday will end up on Broadway. But he let me use his picture. So I've got him in there. And then just all types of comic books, cartoons, to more serious paintings. I used those at the beginning of each chapter. And then rather than have academic quotes about Davy Crockett, I have different celebrities through the years talking with quotes about fame, whether it's a positive quote, or most of them are a negative quote about fame. I think I've got one from Madonna. I don't want to misquote Madonna, but she says something along the lines of, if I had known fame was going to be like this, I might not have worked so hard. So a lot of quotes about fame.
And you mentioned being involved with, the Elvis Presley, foundation, estate, the whole thing. You've seen, that firsthand in many ways. You're even yourself, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Fame can add a lot to someone's life, but there is a price that has to be paid. And it's definitely not for everybody. It's not for me.
Yeah, yeah. Although you're on the Jim Masters show live right now, so I think you've
That
you've hit
counts.
you've hit the pinnacle, and the audience is already calling you one of the loveties. So I mean, like I say to everybody, there's Oscars and Tonys and Tellys and Peabodys and Grammys and all of these things. But when you get to be a lovety on the Jim Masters show, it's your feet must be tingling about now. I don't doubt.
What price am I going to have to pay though?
That's it. You just have to continue to smile when you greet everybody at Discovery Park, and that's good.
I got that. I got that covered.
What about the relationship between Crockett and West Tennessee land?
Yeah. So, a lot of people that settled in West Tennessee weren't necessarily here officially. There was all this land that was going to be made available once Andrew Jackson got finished doing all of his treaties with the different Native American tribes in this area. And so, um, but in the meantime, it was irresistible. If you don't have any place to live and your family's hungry and you don't have any land, it would be hard not to come down here into West Tennessee, clear off a patch of land, um, start to grow crops, build a barn, build a house, start to raise your family. Sometimes people were here, for many, many years, and it felt like home, even though they knew it wasn't. And so they were hopeful that because they did all that work, that the government would then sell them that land at a really cheap price. Unfortunately, a lot of the folks that had the decision makers were hoping to sell that land at a premium price
Mm.
that the settlers would never be able to afford. And so Davy Crockett, his passion was trying to get that land for them either for free or at a really low price because he felt like they had been part of settling it. And so um, he didn't quite have the political gravitas to be able to make that happen. But in a roundabout way, he did because after his death, his son ran for Congress and represented this same area. And because of the passion behind his sacrifice, his son was able to get some legislation through that did protect some of the early settlers, and at least in some cases, they were able to acquire the land that they had worked so hard to settle.
Mm. That's fascinating. So many fascinating things that are revealed in the book. You mentioned a little bit about some of his relations with others. Although they were both from Tennessee, David Crockett and Andrew Jackson, not necessarily friends.
Yeah, Davy Crockett, if hopefully the book, and somebody texted me the other night, a friend who was reading it and said, I love that you've included warts and all. So he was far from a perfect person, and as are any of us. And so he um, didn't spend a lot of time with his family, didn't provide them for them really financially. His first wife died, and his second wife, she pretty much she raised both her children, the children they had together, and the children he had with his first wife, pretty much on her own while he was running around Washington and campaigning. And he wasn't the greatest father or husband. Um, but he had a passion for people. So uh, I mentioned he supported the settlers. The other people that he really had a passion for was protecting the Native Americans. Andrew Jackson and many of the people in this area wanted them gone. They wanted their land. In many cases, the Native Americans had actually adopted a very European way of life. So they had farms. They wore clothes like everybody else, like their neighbors. A lot of them sent their kids to school up east, and had embraced that lifestyle. But others wanted them off. They wanted their land. They wanted to get rid of them. And so Andrew Jackson was a big part of that. He made no qualms about wanting to get the land away, and so he had legislation in place that ultimately resulted in the Trail of Tears, which many people know about. And so Davy Crockett was the only person from Tennessee who voted against that legislation in 1830 and wrote a great deal about it, probably with some help, but made a lot of really great points of why this was immoral to force people off their land against their will. He was for allowing them, to willingly move to Oklahoma or the places set aside for Native Americans further west, but only if they chose to. He didn't want them run off. And so he was a fly in the ointment when it came to Jackson, and was vocal about it, wrote about it, made speeches about it, and about how immoral he felt like it was. And it to me, in the back of the book, I have both Andrew Jackson's speech about the legislation that he was pushing through, and then I also have Davy Crockett's speech, or a reporter's covering of the speech, where he explained why he was against the legislation. So I think it's fascinating to read to go back and read the debates and the fights and the things that were going on all the way back then, and to see that, Davy Crockett really was on the right side, of history when it came to that. So, a lot of people, of course, almost no one knows about all that anymore. It's really been forgotten by, everybody. So I just wanted the book to be an opportunity to bring things like that forward and say, hey, look, this guy that you see is kind of a joke on, 1950s Disney television. He really had substance to him, and he really, loved people and had a passion for trying to help uh, those who were less fortunate. So hopefully it does that, and people can really appreciate the sacrifices that he made, and the mission that the personal mission that I think he felt like he had.
Touch a little bit on the Alamo too, right? Obviously, the story of what really happened at the Alamo and how we teach history is sort of in the news again in a very big way. Um, and that's touched upon within the book itself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, shortly after the Alamo, and then, and in the decades that followed, um, the story evolves to, you know things that touch on race, touch on class, and there are some folks that have a certain way they want that told, that isn't necessarily the truth. And so historians, their job is to um, point out the truth. And so, I'm no historian, but I read a lot about the Alamo that historians have written. And, a lot of people want the story to be, in Davy Crockett's case, for example, that he fought to the end. He ran out of bullets. Um, he used his gun as a weapon and killed hundreds and hundreds of Mexican soldiers. Um, Ultimately, that's probably not what happened. There is a book that came out many, many years ago of a soldier that was there, who has some authority, and who, you know, many people believe uh, that they did fight, and Davy Crockett was very brave because he could have left at any moment. The Alamo, they were way outnumbered. They were, but there was opportunities for them to get out, and he didn't take. He stayed and he fought with his fellow soldiers. But at the end, a small group of soldiers who'd been in the Alamo were captured, hoping that they would not be killed. It is thought that David Crockett was probably amongst those. Santa Anna didn't. He had put up the flag of no quarter very early on, and those men were brutally slaughtered right there as soon as they were captured. It's thought David Crockett was probably amongst those. Their bodies were burned on a funeral pyre with all the other soldiers that had been killed. So, it's a very tragic, sad
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
But in the book, it's also a lot about relationships, as you mentioned. It's interesting to me. It ends in a sad way, but David Crockett, his last letter had been to his daughter, who was his near adult daughter, and he wrote to her, "Listen, do not be sad about what I'm going through, because I am among friends." And so I
Yeah.
thought that was a really important way to end the book. That, what, he was among friends, and he was doing what he loved to do when he died, which is explore, which is, be somewhere that's brand new that people don't know about, trying to discover what was right around the next corner. So, I felt like that was a good way to end his story, so that people could celebrate his life rather than mourn it.
Beautifully said. And it is, like you say, a celebration in many aspects, in many ways. It has been hard to believe, like you said earlier, 235 years since he was born. And I think most people still know, of course, the theme song, Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier. His legacy, it still endures, doesn't it? People are still fascinated by him.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been, just for the heck of it, anytime I'm around a young person, I say, I want you to finish this. And although I'm not a singer, I start off the Davy Crockett theme song, and almost 100% of the time they can finish it. And so I ask, where did you hear that? And they say, you know, I don't know. And so they somehow it's permeated their brain. I opened the book with an episode of The Simpsons where Bart Simpson pulls up and his family pulls up to a cabin. And Bart Simpson for their vacation. And Bart Simpson looks at it and says, "A cabin? What am I, Davy Crockett?"
Yeah.
And then he looks at his dad and said, "Also, who's Davy Crockett?"
Yeah.
So, I think that's the case. So, really, for this book, I wanted to ask for Bart Simpson. I wanted to answer the question for Bart Simpson and all the other young people. Also, who's Davy Crockett? So, hopefully, I'm doing that just a little bit.
Mm, that's really, really cool. And it's quite a ride when you write a book like this. You learn so much and people connect with it. And again, it's a part of Americana, right? This is part of American history, warts and all. It's part of how, the country came together. And there's a lot of teachable moments and even lessons within the book. It isn't just something that's there for the entertainment value of it. There are a lot of messages that are, can be teachable moments for people in the book, right?
Yeah, and it's there's both teachable moments, and then there's also just pure education slash entertainment. As I mentioned, we've talked about Elvis a few times. Of course, Elvis is the king of rock and roll, but he's also the king of licensing. So there's all types of license deals out there. Um, I think it's fascinating that there's some business things in here. How David Crockett and pretty much invented the licensed product business and industry, by having someone paint his photographs, having them created into wood prints, and then having his signature and his tagline on there, and then having them sold. So he was selling celebrity posters and put together these business deals really early on. And so I loved that aspect of it too, to look at the business deals he put together, publishing deals, and how he wrote his own book because he saw other people making money off his brand. So he wrote a book, and how he pestered his publishers to death, and on the title and how it was positioned and how it was being advertised, and so just those kind of things were fascinating as well.
Mm, really cool. When you think about that, yeah, all the licensing and everything that we all depend on now to do even the simplest of tasks. The book itself is available at Amazon, right? And other places.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the quickest way to find it is to go to Amazon.com and search, or folks can go to my website if they're interested in Davy Crockett. I've got a lot more stuff on there about David Crockett. The website is therealdavidcrockett.com. So they can check out more about him and his fame, and the book, and links to buy it can be found there.
The Real David Crockett.com.
That's right.
Cool. Very, very cool. And of course, the park as well. Again, this is so near and dear to your heart. Is the park open year round for folks who are watching and saying, gee, this, in addition to the book, the Discovery Park is something I want to, take advantage of visiting and really soaking my, just diving in and just soaking it all up and enjoying it. Tell us about some of the mechanics as far as, how often you guys are open and things of that nature.
Sure. We have a low season and a high season, like most museums and parks. And so during our low season, we're closed on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. But then in the high season, we're open 7 days a week. So anyone can go to discoveryparkofamerica.com and click on hours and schedule. We've got all kinds of tools there to plan your trip. When you come this way, you want to visit Realfoot Lake, no doubt. But most people come this way, they want to check out some of the diners or dives that are around here that I would personally take you to eat. So we've got that list on there so you can eat some of the incredible cuisine in this area. We list hotels and cabins and other places that you can stay when you come and plan a visit here. So everything you need should be right there on the website.
Mm, really is amazing. And I know you're having the time of your life really overseeing the operation. I'm sure it's again, you must feel like a little kid. I know
Yeah,
I
I
would.
am. I am no question. I am one blessed dude.
Well, this was amazing. Is there any message or anything that you'd like to leave our audience who are watching right now, whether it's about David Crockett or about the park, that would inspire them? Because there could be, I don't doubt, some young minds watching right now too, who are being inspired by all of this, the park, the David Crockett story, all of it.
Sure. You know what? I'll end with what Davy Crockett was one of the first people to really have a tagline, and so his tagline was "Be sure you're right, and then go ahead." He didn't want people holding back; he wanted them going ahead. So you know what? I'm going to steal one from Crockett and say, "Go ahead."
I love it. That is fantastic. Scott, this was really amazing. And we really appreciate all the time and all the wit and wisdom and the passion and enthusiasm for what you're doing there at the park as the president and CEO, and also the book. I wish you continued success with the book. And I hope the show met whatever expectations you had and that you enjoyed the time with me as much as I certainly have with you, Scott.
Absolutely. I just need to get you here. We'll go out
Yeah.
on Realfoot Lake, look at some eagles, eat some fish.
Yeah.
Come on down here.
Yeah, we're going to come on down. Absolutely. We've got mutual friends too, June and Bart and so many others. It's a small world, isn't it?
It really is. It's crazy. It's crazy how small it is when you live in a rural community. You find out just how small it is.
Absolutely. Well, continued blessings to you and everybody at the park and to your family as well. And let's stay in touch. I'd love to get together, break bread, of course, and have you back as there's more exciting things happening at the park. And in case there's another book that does come out, shh, don't tell anybody.
No,
You know,
no, that'll be a while.
that'll be. Thanks, Scott. This was really a privilege, an honor, and a true pleasure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You take care.
You too.
Love the bow tie too. Very
Thank you.
spiffy.
Thank you.
Take care. Scott Williams, President and CEO of Discovery Park of America, again in Union City, Tennessee. It really is an extraordinary place. And maybe this is the first time you're getting a chance to hear about it. I wholeheartedly encourage you. The more I was doing research for this episode of the Jim Masters Show, Entertainment Lifestyle Talk Show series, I was just fascinated. I love places like this. And you guys know that I talk about it often. When you get a chance to just go and explore and learn museums, parks, this is truly what it's all about. And, you not only learn about our history and about our roots, but also accomplishments and how the country came together and some of the incredible things that people have done, inventions and discoveries that have led to life the way it is now, and really fascinating. It's a beautiful place. So what I love about it too is the natural setting. You know what I mean? A lot of times you can go to places where it's so overly modernized and so just a lot of cement and a lot of steel everywhere, and you don't get a chance to really feel, it's just sort of like a grounding. And I think you do here in so many beautiful ways. The book, of course, as we mentioned, there it is. And that is really quite fascinating. And I think you're going to want to get that as well. And again, the real davidcrockett.com is the website to check that out. And if you want to, again, learn more about the park, Discovery Park of America, that is that website as well. Really a fascinating conversation with Scott Williams, not only about the Discovery Park, but also about David Crockett in ways that you probably had never thought before about David. You probably, like he was mentioning, knew sort of that Disney-ified version of Davy Crockett, the song and everything else. But there's always a story behind the story, right? And somebody that knows that well is my sidekick here, George Burns. We always show him towards the end of the show, and he was fascinated. I bet you probably knew David Crockett, right? Now he lived to 100 himself. Gang, this was really fantastic. We love having you here, and we always learn something. As we say, our series here, our Entertainment Lifestyle Talk Show series, is all about entertaining, inspiring, educating and informing. And so is our YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV. It's a channel dedicated to entertaining, informing, educating, and inspiring. We encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and also click the notification bell so you never miss any of the content we have on the show. It really is amazing what we do and what we have going on. And we thank Scott again very much for joining us, President and CEO of Discovery Parks of America and author as well. Really, really fantastic. And just really a blessing to have him on the show. And we thank all of you as well. This was really terrific. We always tell you guys, don't forget to smile. Don't forget to share the levity. Find your Zen place. My Zen place, of course, is with loving family and friends. And then the ocean, of course. You got to drag me out of it. Swimming, surfing, boogie boarding, sailing, all of it. And we are here on the East Coast in the Northeast and always near and in the ocean, a couple blocks from it right now, and very blessed to the ocean. Also cycling and tennis and sports, gardening, writing. Those are other Zen places for me as well. And of course, my work in television, film, stage, all of that work on camera, on air, behind the scenes, another Zen place for me as well. Again, thanks so much for being with us, gang. You are the best. Thanks for all the great comments. Again, we thank Scott Williams. Really amazing conversation, President and CEO of Discovery Park of America in Union City, Tennessee, USA. Really a very, very special place. We thank you for joining us on this episode of the Jim Masters Show, and we invite you to join us again. To learn more about our show, just go to our YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV, and check out over 440 plus episodes of our entertainment lifestyle talk show series. There's something there for everybody. We'll see you again soon on the next one, okay? Thanks for being with us. We always appreciate you as well. Take care, be well, and see you on the next episode of the Jim Masters Show. Take care and bye for now.